So I've worked as a computer programmer for 10 years now, and based on that, I'm going to say that writing software tests is usually a waste of time. If you're writing software for the NASA Mars robot or whatever, where billions of dollars are on the line and there's no room for mistakes, then, write all the tests. Fine, I won't stop you. But otherwise, it's a huge waste of time, fam. See, the point of testing is to detect bugs in your software. By finding and fixing bugs before delivering your software, you improve the performance of the software and the overall experience of your customer. At least in theory. The problem is, that doesn't work. No process can eliminate all bugs. Testing is not going to make your software bug-free. And the thing is, from the customer perspective, there's not much difference between one bug and a dozen. Any number of bugs is a bummer. Unless your code is perfect, which it won't be, you're going to get the same amount of flack, in my experience. In my experience, your perceived competence actually goes up when users detect bugs and you fix them. If you fix all the bugs in advance, you don't get any credit for it. Letting bugs in your code is almost like a psychological hack. It's similar to how video editors, I hear, will add black frames or something to their first edit, or filmmakers will put an obvious error in their script to allow their customer, for filmmakers it's producers and execs, to report an error and feel like they're collaborating on the project. Mistakes strangely make customers happier than if you just delivered a perfect product. I think it satisfies their need to be critical and feel like they're holding you to account or getting their money's worth by having you do, extra work to fix things. But really, you have no choice but to deliver imperfect software because tests will not make your software perfect. And to see this, let's look at how a software test works. A unit of code, nominally a function, is effectively a theory about how to solve a problem with code. And just like any theory or hypothesis, it can be falsified, but never really proved. A test can show that a function doesn't work in a particular case, but it can't tell you that it works in every case or that it solves your conceptual problem, and it can't tell you precisely how to make the function work better. That's a problem of logic and creativity and a uniquely human understanding that can't be automated according to some objective process. Now, there is some evidence that tests reduce errors in code, but my assessment is that that's only because a requirement to write tests forces you to produce more readable code in the first place, which, not surprisingly, has fewer errors. If you don't try to be clever and you write code in an obvious way that's clearly correct, you're going to make fewer errors. Inherently, tests don't improve code. The paradox is that if what to test is obvious, then you don't need the test because whether it passes is evident in the code itself. But if what to test isn't obvious, then the test won't be effective because what cases users are going to hit in practice is unknown to you. And so attempting to guess and make test cases is just a waste of time. You're going to check for and catch bugs that users aren't even going to hit. So from the user perspective, it'll be like you did nothing. Errors are better avoided just by writing clearer code. And this is why ultimately what writing tests really does is provide developers with a false sense of security. Yeah, you might catch some bugs, but that doesn't mean you caught all the bugs, and it also doesn't mean you caught any of the bugs your users will actually encounter in practice. It also doesn't mean that your code does what your users expect it to do. And that's all true even assuming your tests are perfect, well constructed. But actually, you have no way of guaranteeing that the tests themselves don't have bugs in them. And this is something I know from experience. I have found bugs in other people's tests more than once. So what are you going to do, right? Test for the tests of the tests of the tests? It's called computer science, remember? Functions are hypotheses and tests are experiments to check those hypotheses. In science, we typically demand that interesting results be replicated by other researchers. And the reason for this is because it's quite possible the original researchers just got a weird sample or made a procedural mistake in their testing. In computer science, it could be, some initialization difference between platforms can cause different results. So any test can have a mistake. A single passing test for a function, therefore, means next to nothing. If you're not confident about your code, the solution is not to write more tests. It's to change the code to be more readable. Make the code obviously correct. Don't rely on tests to ease your trepidation. After all, testing is not free. There's a significant cost to writing and maintaining tests. And again, many tests confirm behavior that users won't even encounter in practice, so writing and running them is a pointless waste of time. And contrary to what I've heard some suggest, tests don't make it easier to rewrite your code by giving you confidence that your rewrite isn't going to break anything. Actually, tests just create a different disincentive, namely that if you refactor the code, you now have to rewrite all your tests too. Okay, so I've dragged tests through the mud, but as much as I dismiss them, there is a place for tests. You certainly should not test behavior that is self-evident from an examination of the code, but you should test things you know the user will do at least once, though you don't have to record them formally or auto-run those kinds of tests. You should also test things you think users won't report, like subtle things that are hard to detect or that would cause intermittent issues that users would find it easy to work around. So, in summary, the way to approach bugs is to consider them unavoidable. Instead of trying to write tests to prevent them, just write code that's easy to modify and fix bugs in, and make it easy for users to report bugs. That's the way to actually produce good software, not trying to control what is uncontrollable. Because it's the users you're trying to please at the end of the day. You don't need to assure the developers that the bugs have been addressed. You need to assure customers. Just give the customers early access to beta software with the expectation that there will be bugs. Then when they see bugs get fixed, they can delude themselves with a notion like some bugs were fixed, therefore all bugs were fixed. You'll do less work, they'll be happier. Oh, and by the way, anyone who disagrees with me on any of this is just trying to sell their books and seminars on how to do testing properly, or else there's someone who doesn't want to admit they got suckered by one of those hucksters. Regardless, anyone who disagrees with me is a liar. Would you look at that? An unfalsifiable hypothesis. The test passes every time, so you know it must be true.